Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Being a family caregiver for someone with dementia is no easy task. And as our healthcare system is increasingly burdened, the gap for assistance to care for those with dementia is frequently being filled by a family caregiver. This has never been truer than during the past year when community resources supporting the family caregiver have decreased due to the pandemic restrictions. To learn more about caregiving during COVID, I'm joined by two guests. Lori McKenna and Lisa Lax are both geriatric clinical social workers and mental health clinicians with the Memory Program at the University of Vermont Medical Center. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Nice to be here.
So Lori, we'll start with you. How has the pandemic and its restrictions affected family caregivers and the elder population?
Well, the number of people in Vermont who provide uncompensated care to family members with dementia is ever increasing. And with the pandemic and the shutdowns of many community resources, the work of the family caregiver has become that much harder. Many have been left without necessary supports in home, like in-home caregivers, personal care attendants coming into the home, adult day programs, and also shutdowns of visitations for those who may have family members in long-term care facilities. Lastly, the inability to mourn people who have been lost has been significant, as people have not been able to have usual rituals that may provide comfort to them with loss of life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really been hard. And Lisa, talk about the availability of respite during the pandemic.
Sure. Well, so concern about the contagion, which is completely understandable, combined with the governor's orders, have meant that family caregivers have had to limit who is around their relative with dementia, who is permitted to come into the home. So, for example, in the past, family who live out of state could come and visit and provide, say a week off or a weekend off. But with the restrictions with travel and quarantining, that becomes totally impractical. And also, even local friends can't visit. Local friends who might have, come and played cards with their loved one or, had a meal. They're being careful. And so it just means there's fewer people who can visit in the home. And then finally, private care companies have had a much harder time with staffing during the pandemic. And so even if you have the means to pay for some respite, it might be harder to get paid care. And even if the caregiver is open to this, but many caregivers are worried about having people come into the home and exposing their loved ones to the pandemic.
Sure, of course. And so what do we know about how the pandemic has impacted the mental health of the family caregiver?
Okay, so
go ahead.
It's very tough stuff. So we know that stress levels strongly impact mental health, and that when there is an increase in stress, there are greater risk for symptoms of anxiety and depression. And of course, this pandemic has radically increased the amount of stress for everyone in all areas of life, from finances and employment to how we get our groceries, to worry about catching the virus and worry about the health of our loved people we love. Just about everything is more complicated. So, even if your washing machine breaks, you can't buy a new one. You have to wait for months. So all of these things add up. And there have also been other upsetting events in the world during this time that have made people feel afraid and worried about the future. So all of this stress impacts relationships, and especially when we are shut in at home with the same one or two other people. And we also know that when we can't do things for self-care, like gather in person with friends and family, or can't get exercise in the way that we're used to, that this also increases the risk of mental health problems.
Right. So, social isolation is difficult for everybody. Talk about social isolation for the family caregiver. Lori, why don't you take that one?
Okay. So in many cases, as Lisa just mentioned, there has been a complete cutoff from family members and or community. Many things that people have been involved, that many people are involved with, like civic groups or exercise groups or church groups, those kinds of things have halted. People have, in many cases, lost their sense of purpose outside of being a family caregiver. So volunteerism, for example, much of that has stopped. It has created tremendous, tremendous loneliness. And in the care facilities, the older adults have also, for the most part, been not allowed to participate in activities within the care facility, like having meals together or doing exercise programs together. They have been shuttered in their rooms. So that has created stress both for them, of course, and for the family members who are not living in the care facility and worrying about them.
So social isolation can also impact physical health, Lisa, probably because you can't get to exercise classes, but maybe in other ways as well.
Absolutely. So what we know more and more is that our minds and our bodies are connected. They are not separate. So when we are under more stress mentally and emotionally, and when we are isolated, this has a direct impact on our bodies and our immune systems. So we've seen this in research about other illnesses. For example, women with breast cancer have a much higher survival rate if they're in support groups, which is interesting. Basically, we are social beings and we need connection with others to cope with stress. And isolation interferes with our overall ability to cope.
Yeah. So Lori, what does caregiver burnout look like, and what can they do?
Yeah, so I want to say one quick thing before I move on to that. And then another particular problem for folks with dementia might be the inability to remember to do these guidelines, like wear a mask or to social distance. And with that frustration and that aggravation, many caregivers have just said, we're staying home. It's safer to stay home.
Thank you.
So caregiver burnout is a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion, and it can last long after caregiving responsibilities have ceased. And what does it look like? It can look like increased stress. It presents with anger and resentment, exhaustion, as I just mentioned, problems with sleep, inability to problem solve is very significant. Health and self-care issues become more problematic with caregiver burnout. Also, we see an increase with the use of alcohol and substances.
So Lisa, what recommendations do you have for family caregivers during this very difficult time?
Well, in general, we strongly encourage caregivers to learn as much about dementia as they can and to work on developing skills to help with what can be very challenging problems, such as repetitions or refusal to accept help, needing more help with things like dressing, etc. So while it's always good to strive to respond skillfully and with compassion, at the same time, none of us are superhuman. This is a time of great stress. We're not always going to live up to our highest standards, and we need to be gentle with ourselves. So that's number one. And the other is self-care, as always, is essential. We can't take care of others if our own emotional and reserves are low. So self-care is going to look very different for each of us, and it's also going to look very different in the pandemic.
A quick creative example of one family coping. We're down to just a few minutes.
Okay, so I see a lot of people doing what they can to stay connected with their, family and friends, and also doing what they can to have a bit of fun. So fortunately, older people, they're embracing technology, and they have regular visits with grandchildren and other family members by Zoom. I hear about people who have mini reunions with their high school and college buddies. And some people are quite creative with Zoom. They do things like family Zoom dance parties, play charades, cook and eat a meal together. Uh, but phone calls are good too. So the other thing is connecting with the natural world has helped many of the people I see, and that includes, the usual walk in the parks, but also getting in the car, going out for a drive, maybe having a picnic in the car, and in front of a beautiful vista. If you can't get out of the house, which is true for many of our folks, maybe set up some bird feeders, have a pair of binoculars handy, grow some plants inside. Some people have adopted a pet. Crafts, music is great. I just want to mention the memory cafes are really an important resource, and that's a creative way for people to connect with others. And right now those are online, and they're a special gathering place for caregivers and people with dementia. And also the Alzheimer's Association they have virtual groups and classes too.
Great. And Lori, are you seeing things changing, giving way as people are becoming vaccinated?
I am. I think Lisa is too. We're seeing hope. Yeah, that's we're saying a couple of times. We're seeing hope. We're seeing people sigh a sense of relief. And people are talking with us about the many reminders that they have about what they've learned during the pandemic and what is the most important things in their lives. And people are focusing there. Great. So yeah, it's nice to see those things emerge.
Well, before we've run out of time, but how can viewers contact the UVM Medical Center Memory Center if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so we can be reached at 802-847-1111. And when you call, you will be reached by someone in our front office. Please ask for social work services and you will be directed to either Lisa or myself.
Okay, thank you so much to Lori McKenna and Lisa Lax for joining me today to talk about caregiving around dementia. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.